So welcome back to the Joe Rockstar channel. This month has been a pretty tough month. I've been dealing with the loss of my mother. She recently died. And although her physical presence has been with us for the last 8 years, dementia and Alzheimer have robbed us of her memories, her personality, basically all the things that made her who she was. Over the years, I remember my mother suffering many head injuries, from recreational injuries, car accidents. Even one time she was the victim of a hit and run accident where she was left with injuries for life. She was even assaulted with a briefcase by some man on the subway, basically, the BART train in San Francisco. So she had it pretty hard. Now it's becoming pretty apparent that multiple head injuries are a contributor to dementia and Alzheimer's. And so this has got me thinking about my own history of head injuries.
So I've been without a decent helmet since the Rough Rider 100 back in February. That nasty crash I had in the first lap has turned out to be much worse than I originally thought.
Physically, it's caused me to have trouble making a fist. These knuckles on the two inside fingers are very painful when I try to make a fist. I can't lift my arm much higher than this without pain in my shoulder, and I have some neck pain left over still. And that was in February. Today is April 25th, and I still have all that pain.
Although I did a pretty good job with the tuck and roll, I pretty much ran myself over with the bike. Somehow this hit was hard enough to crack the carbon fiber of my Liat helmet.
But even if it didn't crack, this helmet would still be toast.
Now, in my critically acclaimed 5 tips for beginners video, I talked about how I don't try to save money when it comes to boots and helmets. I probably should have said that I don't buy low quality helmets and gear.
There's nothing wrong with trying to save money and finding a good deal on good gear. It's actually pretty smart. But buying cheaply made gear just to save a couple of bucks isn't. Every time you take a hit to the head, your helmet loses some of its effectiveness.
When you hit your head, your skull comes to a sudden stop, and your brain is floating around inside your skull, just like a passenger in a car without a seatbelt. When your skull comes to that sudden stop, inertia causes your brain to keep moving until it collides with the inner walls of your skull. Even a helmet can't stop this from happening. But what a helmet can do is reduce the suddenness of the skull coming to a stop. The foam inside the helmet shell is meant to compress as your skull presses against it, kind of like an airbag would for a passenger in a car accident. There's still going to be injury, but what could have been broken bones and death becomes bruises and cuts. But bruises and cuts to the brain is still bad. And the worst part is that it's cumulative. Unlike bruises that heal, the brain becomes permanently damaged from even the smallest injuries, and each subsequent injury increases the permanent damage that's been done. More and more we're learning about the results of these small but repeated traumas to the brain, and how it leads to serious health problems like CTE, which is chronic traumatic, however you pronounce this word.
Now, CTE is a brain condition that's associated with repeated blows to the head. It's also believed that it's associated with the development of dementia. Potential signs of CTE are problems with thinking and memory, personality changes, and behavioral changes, including aggression and depression.
Some of you might be asking, well, why ditch a helmet if the shell is still intact? Well, after compressing from the crash, the foam inside your helmet will never decompress back to its full effectiveness. The next time your helmet takes a hit, the foam is not going to be able to compress again, and it's not going to protect your brain. And sadly, it's pretty much impossible to see when your EPS foam liner is compromised. Technically, anytime a helmet is dropped or it hits the ground, it should be replaced. Now, as if having to replace what may still appear to be a perfectly good helmet was not enough, the industry standards for helmet safety in the United States is DOT. And without getting too much into the weeds and the debate, that standard is outdated, and it shouldn't be considered adequate by any smart rider who values their life. Other standards like SNELL and ECE are more stringent than DOT, but none of them are able to fully protect a rider from concussion either. And remember, these standards are pretty much the bare minimum in protection that you should be looking for. But there are some companies that are actually trying to get ahead of the challenges of CTE while continuously studying the problems and looking to use new technology to make their helmets a safer choice. For example, several companies have looked for ways to reduce rotational forces, which are devastating to the brain tissue and can permanently damage the corpus callosum, which connects the two brain hemispheres. Research shows that atrophy caused by tissue damage in this area can be a major contributor to CTE. So it became an absolute priority to find a helmet that was not only affordable, but also had the right combination of safety features in a style that I could be happy with. Enter the LS2 Subverter MX470. At under $300, it looks good and it feels comfortable, and it's not too heavy. Most importantly, it's DOT and ECE rated, and it features their synthetic slip system, which is meant to reduce rotational forces that cause the twisting and stretching of that brain tissue. And with this paint job, it was love at first sight. Now, it's not as light as my Liat was, however, it's around $100 cheaper. But even at this price point, it hurts to fork out more dough for another helmet every time they take a hit. And unfortunately, manufacturers charge a premium that can make good protective gear difficult to afford. This means you got a bunch of people riding around in cheaply made products. Bottom line, I think helmets and basically all good protective gear is way too expensive. But some things are worth protecting no matter what the cost. And one of those things is your brain. Yeah, it's nice if you can protect that pretty face if you got one like mine. But without your brain, you're a vegetable, or worse. There's just no way to protect your head 100% in motorsports, but when choosing your helmet, don't just get the minimum DOT, SNELL, or ECE standards. Look for a manufacturer that takes extra steps, maybe goes above and beyond what the industry standards require. Look for designs that minimize rotational forces and have less weight or size to rotate. And most of all, ensure the helmet fits correctly, because none of that matters if it doesn't fit right. Now, I hope this helps at least a few of you make good choices when it comes to protecting your brain. That way you can live to ride another day. And maybe someday we'll see each other out there on the trails. Anyways, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.